So this is a quick video about using surfaces to model. We started our sketch exercise creating solid elements, and we use extrusions and shapes, and we use booleans, and we subtract, we union, we can intersect, and you can see that we started making the stud walls of this little house model with solids. I can go up into the visual styles and change it to conceptual, and now you can kind of see those holes in what we've cut. These are solid elements. Now I want to talk about using surfaces to create other elements within your model. So just to follow up with solids versus surfaces, here's a little rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude that rectangle into a solid box. Now once I extrude that into a solid box and I look at that in my shaded viewport, we can see that it's a box, and we can add and subtract or union and subtract if we want to. What I want to illustrate is that if I use the explode command to explode it, then I can actually delete out the top and I can see into it. So now it's actually comprised of 6 surfaces. In this case they're called regions. We'll talk about that later. But this solid has been converted or exploded now into a series of surfaces. Now to create a surface from the beginning, there's a number of different ways. And if we look up at our ribbon up here in CAD, we can actually see that we've even got surface modeling tools and mesh modeling tools as opposed to the solids. I'm going to go back to home, and I'm just going to say a few of the quickest ways that we can make surfaces so you can get started with that. First thing I can do is make a line, just any old line. Now what we have to think about a surface is that it has no depth at all. I want to use the word thickness, but notice if I grab that line, go to the properties command, and I actually change the thickness in CAD to 10 feet, I now have a 10-foot tall line. We just have to understand that thickness is how we actually extrude lines in a sense. It's not really an extrusion of that line. We have converted that line into a surface. We can make another line over here, and we can actually use the extrude tool to make that into a surface. And I'm just going to drag it up a certain height. Now one of the things you'll notice in this 2D view though is now we have a mesh. If I go into 2D wireframe view, we'll see the difference between these two surfaces. Now they'll render similarly, but one is just a line with a thickness that becomes basically a quad surface, and another is a mesh that's subdivided into a 6x6 matrix, the surf tabs, and we'll talk about those later in the semester. Another quick way to make a surface is the 3D face command. I can type 3D face or just 3F enter, and I can go and pick 3 or 4 points. 3 points if I stop the command now would make a triangle, or 4 points would make another quad face. And notice that if I go ahead and go to conceptual shaded view, this is a meshed extruded line. This is a line with a thickness that creates a pure quad, and this is a 3D face that actually has 4 points, but they're UCS independent. What I mean with UCS independent is if we look at these other two surfaces that aren't 3D faces, say I grab this guy right here and this mesh element and grab its corner, and I tell it, yes, I know I'm messing with something parametric. Notice as I move one of the other ends of that line, the whole line goes with me together and it stays in the plane that it was created. And we can kind of see that it hasn't moved over here in this viewport. If I grab the other one, I can grab this top area and I can do the same thing, or I can go into this viewport and I can actually go up or down. Notice now that I've actually created a very strange space. It's still a line. The 2 points are completely different places. I'm going to undo that. Well, it won't let me, so I'm just going to stretch it back around and fix that on my own. But you can see how it kind of makes an interesting situation. Let me see if I grab that here and put it down here, and it's still a parallelogram. However, I can grab my 3D face that I made here, and I can grab any one of those 4 corners, and I can snap them to anything I want on my model. And notice now I've created a very strange surface. So those 4 points are just points in space. It doesn't care what your UCS is. Notice how I can flag it around. It actually bends because 3 of the points stay the same, or I can pick just about any point that I want out in space and change that 3D surface or that 3D face. So to recap on the quickest, simplest ways to make surfaces now to get you started is 1, I make a line. Remember, I make a line that I can actually change the properties and give it a thickness. This time for fun I'll make it 4 feet tall, and now you can see it's a 4-foot thick line, or it's a surface that's basically the length of the line and 4 feet high. I can make another line, and I can go up here to my extrude tool and I can extrude it. I did that before, and I just drag it up. Now let's say this one's 6 feet. And remember, if I go into the 2D wireframe, I'll see the difference between an extruded line, which meshes out with subdivisions, or a line with a thickness. And then the third one that I made, remember, was 3DF. And I can just pick the 4 points, or 3. If I hit enter after 3, it makes me a triangle. If I hit enter after 4, or if I don't hit enter, if I just pick 4 points, then it makes a 4-pointed face, and it'll snap to anything regardless of what my UCS is, because it's independent of the UCS. That's the quick surfaces, and next we're going to talk about normals.